Welcome to the third and final part of me nearly ranking 100 new movies that I saw from 2025. This video will essentially be covering the best films of the year, the cream of the crop, the movies that made this year so special. I've criticized a lot of movies in the previous videos, but this one is solely going to be Hopecore. Without wasting any more time, let's get into it. Starting off this video is The Life of Chuck. I found this movie to be very beautiful and human. It of course tackles themes of existentialism and life, as the title suggests, but I found these ideas to carry a lot of heart and were overall thought-provoking. The story is divided into 3 acts, starting from Act 3 and ending with Act 1, and each act gives us a piece of the puzzle as to what exactly is going on. Act 1 being my personal favorite because we see Chuck as a kid, and not only do we learn more about Chuck, but we are rewarded by seeing how this connects to the rest of the mystery. The third act is about the end of the world. It focuses on a group of characters separate to Chuck and seeing them navigate through the inevitable end. However, Chuck is randomly appearing everywhere on signs, and TV is thanking him for his 39 years. The second act has this really awesome dance sequence, but we don't understand the significance of it yet until the first act. Outside of how much I love the execution of the themes and ideas, the writing and overall filmmaking are a huge plus with Mike Flanagan at the helm. All the performances were solid, the standouts being Mark Hamill, the child actor who plays Chuck in Act 1, and Matthew Lillard, who briefly appears in it for one scene but completely knocks it out of the park. Tom Hiddleston actually isn't in the movie as much as the marketing would lead you to believe, but his presence is definitely felt throughout the entire project. I saw this movie as a beautiful celebration of life. The next movie is Hamnet, which is based on a book which is also based on Hamlet. The story is about William Shakespeare and his wife dealing with the devastating loss of their son Hamnet, which becomes a huge inspiration for the Hamlet play. I think I'm in the outlier when it came to my enjoyment of this film, because I wasn't really hooked by the story and the characters that much. From my perspective, I thought it moved too fast past a lot of the character focus scenes for me to really care for these characters, but when I talked to other people about it, they felt the complete opposite. So I personally wasn't really on board with the first half of the movie, but your experience could be completely different. So I don't know if I should hold this against the movie or not. But the movie started picking up for me when it got to the tragedy aspect of the story, and then the climax is where this movie really became great. Paul Mescal and Jessie Buckley were at the top of their game. The filmmaking had so much personality and great uses of color and lighting. I really liked how much of this film consisted of wide shots. There's hardly any shot reverse shot or cuts in many of the scenes, which in turn gave the movie more personality. Even though I wasn't engaged with the movie as much as other people, I think there's plenty of merit here that levels it up to being great. And this is also a great comeback story for Chloe Zhao after the disaster that was Eternals. The next movie is Bring Her Back, and I think this is better than the Philippa brothers' previous horror flick, which was Talk to Me. It's about these 2 orphan siblings who are placed with a foster mother. However, they start to discover some weird spooky stuff that's going on with her. This premise feels very familiar to other horror films, but the Philippa brothers find a way to make the execution of this familiar story unique. I thought the family dynamic between the siblings was good. The sister in the film is blind, which is used in some very unique ways, mainly used to create tension or suspense because of course she can't see anything. The actress who plays the character is also blind, just in one eye. Sally Hawkins was super good in the film, very creepy and unsettling. The film is just as brutal as Talk to Me. Plenty of painful and cringe-inducing imagery. There's plenty of great style and cinematography. The child acting in this film is excellent, especially from Jonah Wren Phillips. This movie was another slam dunk from the Philippa brothers. The next movie is Materialists, and this movie got a lot of hate, and I never understood it. I watched it when it came out, and I rewatched it about a month ago, and it was still solid. It's about a matchmaker played by Dakota Johnson, caught in a love triangle between her wealthy new client and her struggling ex-boyfriend. I really liked all the characters here. All of them had plenty of scenes for the movie to flesh them out, or give us moments to breathe and understand these characters. The writing felt very authentic. I think the cinematography really reflects this too, with it consisting of many scenes where the camera will just hold on the main characters just talking or discussing, and it won't cut away. It made me a lot more immersed into these people's lives. With the movie dealing with matchmaking, not Call of Duty, but dating matchmaking, there's plenty of commentary on modern dating and standards. I think the love triangle aspect is handled pretty well here. It's not black and white at all. Both the men in this love triangle are treated pretty fairly by the movie, and there isn't some third act reveal that, ooh, one of them is actually evil or some weird cliche shit like that. The fairness adds to the authenticity. If I had to critique it, I think maybe one of the subplots in the film could have concluded a lot better. It felt kind of rushed, but overall I had a great time with this. The next movie is Sinners. It's about these twin brothers who open up a juke joint but are soon attacked by vampires. This might be a bit controversial, but originally this was just gonna go into the good tier, because overall I think it is a good movie, but I didn't think it was great until I rewatched it, and I completely forgot how phenomenal the music was. Like, I was walking around my house just doing stuff, and my sister was watching Sinners, and anytime the musical numbers started going off, I had to stop and watch. Holy shit, Rocky Road to Dublin, You Lied to Me, Will You Go, Lassie Go, and Last Time I Seen the Sun are my favorite original songs of the year, hands down. And the original score on its own is really good, with it blending different types of music too. I really loved the use of 80s guitar riffs. This was a 100% deserved Oscar win for Ludwig Göransson. He's been on my radar since Oppenheimer, and he delivered another banger. Everything else about this movie is pretty good. Michael B. Jordan was pretty good with him playing twins, but some people need to chill out with the glazing. He was good, but not Daniel Day-Lewis levels because he played two characters, which aren't even that distinct from each other in the first place. Not that I had any trouble distinguishing them, but it wasn't like the performances were night and day. Again, I thought he was good, and both the characters he played were distinct to a certain degree, but it wasn't mind-blowing to me. A performance that I did really like is Jack O'Connell as the main villain. He eats up the scenery and he's just so fun to watch. His vocal performance is also great. He's 2 for 2 with this movie and The Bone Temple. Both are awesome villain performances. Delroy Lindo was great. Miles Canton was pretty solid for it being his first ever movie. His agent cooked. There's probably some other people that I'm forgetting, but the point is that all the acting was really good and made the characters super charismatic and entertaining. I liked how they connected the vampire lore with its themes. The vampire stuff is pretty fun. I had some issues regarding parts of the third act. Everyone should have died in the third act but are saved by plot armor. There's also an instance of a character legit teleporting behind a vampire to save someone. Like, it makes no logical sense how they got there. Another issue I take isn't really related to the movie itself, but how people parade this movie for being an original project, when it literally takes plot beats from the movie From Dusk Till Dawn. And this is a very minor nitpick, but the daytime scenes look very bleh. At first, I thought it might have been the bulbs in the theater that might have been fucking with the look of the movie, but no, it's actually underexposed. Combined with the dark green filter, and it felt like an assault on the eyeballs. Okay, maybe not that bad, but it was annoying to say the least. The movie is pretty good, but what seriously elevates it is the musical elements. Fire soundtrack. The next film is Black Bag, which I reviewed back when it came out. The film kinda got swept under the rug as the year went on, but I never forgot it. The movie is about an MI6 agent played by Michael Fassbender, who's given a list of people who are suspected to have leaked Cerberus, a top secret software program that can be used to create a nuclear meltdown and kill thousands. However, one of the people on that list is his wife, and throughout the film he investigates all the suspects to find out who the mole is. The plot is very simple but effective in creating an engaging mystery that keeps you guessing whether his wife or any of the other characters are the mole or not. The film gives plenty of characterization for all the people, which in turn makes you more engaged with the overall mystery, and it's all wrapped up in a very satisfying manner. All the performances are great, with Michael Fassbender, Cate Blanchett, and Pierce Brosnan being the standouts. With only 90 minutes, the film doesn't waste any time, and every scene is used to push the plot forward, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. A lot of the movie reminded me a ton of Hitchcock, how it creates suspense, not only in individual scenes, but for the grand narrative. The cinematography is very sleek and clean, and the score worked really well with the tone and the type of story the film is going for. The score mainly consisted of jazz, which added more to the old spy thriller Hitchcock vibe. I wish the film was given the flowers that it deserves. The next movie is Friendship. It's about a guy played by Tim Robinson who meets this weather reporter played by Paul Rudd, and they become really good friends, but it soon becomes obsessive. So yeah, it's very similar to Lurker, but it's a lot more lighthearted. It's very much a comedy first and foremost, and most of it consisted of cringe comedy, which I felt it exceeded at. The cringe was super effective, and in a way, it's very much different than a typical comedy because of its emphasis on the cringe. This guy pretty much does all the wrong dialogue options throughout the entire film and completely lacks any self-awareness or any social skills. If the entire movie is succeeding very well at the comedy aspects throughout most of its runtime, then yeah, I'd say it's a great movie. It's not really anything thematically rich or trying to say anything deep about the world. It's not really trying to have a deep plot or characters. It's just a great comedy. The next film is The Luckiest Man in America. It's about a man played by Paul Walter Hauser who goes on a game show called Press Your Luck and absolutely kills it. However, the people behind the game show suspect that he's cheating and try to sabotage him by any means possible. It's a really tight 90-minute thriller of this really weird, extravagant dude versus the people behind the scenes, with the stakes getting bigger and bigger as he wins more money and the people behind the scenes start using more and more cheap, dirty, underhanded tactics to throw this guy off his game. It's awesome to see Paul Walter Hauser as a leading man. He can balance so many different tones well. The guy he plays is so weird, but the movie's able to make you root for and really care for the guy. The soundtrack is super unique and cool. I don't have a ton to say about this, but go check it out, it's pretty fun. The next movie is Caught Stealing. It's about a former baseball player turned bartender, played by Austin Butler, who accidentally gets into a huge conflict involving gangsters, and is then trying to get through the film on the skin of his teeth. This was a huge surprise from Aronofsky, because a lot of his films are super dark and nihilistic, so it's interesting to see him go from The Whale to this movie, because this is easily his most lighthearted film. It still gets its hands dirty when needed, but overall it's probably the most hopeful Aronofsky project. It reminded me heavily of early Guy Ritchie, not only in its humor, but some of the aspects of the plot kind of reminded me of Snatch. I was initially scared of the overabundance of humor in the trailers. I thought it might prioritize comedy over plot and characters, but I'm happy to say that it didn't. The characters were compelling, and the main character was given his own mental obstacles to get over, which was enough to make this movie tangible for me as a viewer. The movie had meat on its bones. All the acting was great here. Austin Butler was great as always. Matt Smith's character was my favorite character, but unfortunately, he's not in the movie that much. Nice to see Liev Schreiber in a new project. Vincent D'Onofrio was unrecognizable, literally. So yeah, it's a fun, engaging film. Check it out if you haven't. The next film is The Naked Gun, and it's one of the best comedies of the year. There's a great balance between extremely intelligent, well-designed jokes and plenty of stupidity, but there's a sophistication in the stupidity, the smart-ass humor, and what brings it together is the deadpan delivery, not only by Liam Neeson, but the rest of the cast. The action scenes have plenty of good slapstick, and it makes fun of the tropes and cliches of modern action flicks, even down to mocking the generic soundtracks in plenty of the films. The needle drops were super funny, and I love that this is under 90 minutes and doesn't overstay its welcome. It's very much aware of what it is. And I would say that this is the best comedy of 2025, but there's another movie that takes that spot. The next movie is Weapons. It's about these kids, who all happen to be in the same class, that go missing in the middle of the night, and the townsfolk are trying to figure out what exactly happened. It's a very compelling and interesting mystery. The film was divided into different chapters in non-chronological order, focusing on different characters. My favorite of these chapters was the Josh Brolin one. I found him to be the most interesting and fun character to watch out of all of them. The only flaw I had with the film is that I felt that some of these chapters went on for a bit too long, especially on a rewatch. The film had an excellent balancing act of horror and comedy, and neither one of these elements goes too far and takes you out of the film. Each chapter gives plenty of clues and hints as to what exactly is going on. It's not predictable in the slightest, and it doesn't give away too much, just enough to leave you satisfied and ready for the next clue. And the ultimate reveal is super rewarding and cool. The director of this film is working on a Resident Evil movie, which is pretty awesome. We might actually finally get a good Resident Evil movie. Anyways, great movie. The next film is One Battle After Another. It's about a retired revolutionary whose past gets his daughter into trouble. Surprisingly, this is one of the funniest movies of the year. Throughout 70% of the runtime, I was constantly laughing at the humor. The edit for this movie is extremely impressive. With it being nearly 3 hours long, it felt like maybe 2. Amazing pacing through and through. Johnny Greenwood's score is super simple but very effective. All the acting was fantastic from Leonardo DiCaprio, Benicio del Toro, Tiana Taylor, Chase Infinity, my absolute favorite being Sean Penn. He was super slimy and wormy, just extremely bizarre, but that's what makes him so fun to watch. Everything about this performance is so detailed and adds so much to the character without saying much. It's a very different villain performance because he's not really scary or intimidating at all. He's super pathetic, and the movie leans into this a lot, and it created plenty of funny moments. And also, his walk is hilarious. The movie is gloriously shot, plenty of awesome wonders, and the VistaVision plays a huge part into giving it such a cool look. And this also has one of the most unique car chases I've seen in a while. This movie got into a lot of hot water due to the obviously political aspects of the story. I personally read it more as a satire / exaggeration rather than trying to be a one-to-one of current American politics. I mean, this was being made long before Trump got into office for his second term, but I don't really see it as something like The Boys where it's obviously extremely one-sided or trying to insert current events that will instantly date it. I feel it'll be a lot more timeless because it's not really about Let Orange Man Bad or Ice Bad. The forefront is on the characters, which I felt had a lot of depth and added to the themes. The only flaw I had with the movie is that the main poster for this movie is atrocious. It looks like a shitty straight-to-DVD Redbox movie. The other poster is okay. Could have completely done without the giant Leo head in the background, but yeah, this is probably one of the worst posters I've seen in a while. You know the movie is pretty good when my only complaint is the poster. The next movie is Roofman. It's based on a true story about this guy who robbed multiple McDonald's establishments, got caught but escaped prison, and hid out in a Toys R Us. Even though the main character is obviously doing bad things, you can't help but root for him. He's super nice and polite even during these robbery scenes, which made me question if the real Roofman was like this, and yeah, he was. Typically, Hollywood fictionalizes these types of people to make him flowery, but no, this guy was legit nice. And he carries the same attitude towards people throughout the film, and it makes it really easy to root for him. While hiding out, he eventually starts to go outside every once in a while and starts befriending people, and even gets into a relationship with Kirsten Dunst's character and gets to know her kids. Tatum and Dunst in this movie have a ton of chemistry, and it made the romance very compelling. The comedic elements are handled really well here. The trailers made it out to be a very bog standard generic comedy flick, but I was surprised to see how much of the comedy was on the back burner. There is some comedic stuff, but it's mainly dramatic and character focused. Another element that was fun to watch was to see him try to survive and stay under the radar in this Toys R Us. Overall, this is one of the bigger surprises of the year. The next movie is The Mastermind, which I didn't mean to put another heist film right next to Roofman. It's about a man played by Josh O'Connor who orchestrates a heist of 4 Arthur Dove paintings at the local museum. However, this isn't your typical nail-biting, slick, suave heist movie you've been conditioned to expect. It's very much a subversive anti-heist movie. It's not fast-paced or has fancy editing, it's extremely deliberate. None of the crimes were romanticized or thrilling. There's a lot of long takes focusing on these crimes and showing how time-consuming, tedious, and hard it is to commit crimes, especially from the main character who isn't special in the slightest. He's a very normal guy, which the title is supposed to be ironic. He's not a criminal genius or has any experience in a certain field that would help him with the heist. He doesn't have 20 different contingency plans in case things go wrong. He's just a bored suburban man with too much time on his hands. It kind of reminds me of how in The Killer, the main character gasses himself up in his inner monologues, but nearly fucks up every step of the way. And this film was essentially that, but for the heist genre. And in that way, it was a very unique deconstruction of heist stories. The next movie is Die My Love. It's about a woman played by Jennifer Lawrence battling with severe postpartum depression while isolated in rural Montana with her husband, played by Robert Pattinson. This was very much in line with Lynn Ramsey's other filmography, super weird, experimental, and uncomfortable, because this woman is slowly losing her mind and self-destructing throughout the entire picture. The sound mixing is very unique at times, but also very stressful. The stressful aspect is by mixing different stress-induced sounds like a dog barking or a baby crying. It becomes very overwhelming when that's all overlapping. There's also some scenes where things kind of start out normal or the scene is building to something, and then a loud noise happens and it's pretty startling. It's similar to a jump scare without all the bad shit that comes with it being a jump scare that you'd see in a lot of bad horror films. The film is shot very well on 35mm. There's plenty of great camera work and just beautiful stills throughout the picture. The performances from Pattinson and Lawrence were great, mainly leaning towards Lawrence because she does plenty of crazy shit in this movie. I didn't enjoy this movie as much as others, but it definitely has my respect. The next movie is John Candy, I Like Me. It's of course a documentary about John Candy's life, and it was super tear-jerking. I didn't really know much about John Candy outside of his films, so it was really cool learning about his past and how he slowly moved up the chain to becoming a movie star, as well as getting to learn his interpersonal relationships with his friends and family. There's quite a few stars in here like Mel Brooks, Bill Murray, Tom Hanks, and Macaulay Culkin. We also get a deep dive into his interpersonal conflicts and insecurities. Despite him being a larger-than-life figure, he had the same problems as everyone else. He was human, and hearing how sweet and how nice he was made this documentary even more sad. He brought so much joy to not only the people around him, but to millions of people around the world. Overall, this was a beautiful tribute to a great man. The next film is Eternity. It's about this old couple, and in this couple, the husband dies and enters the afterlife. However, the beginning of this afterlife turns out to be like a hub world, where you can choose what world you want to stay in for the rest of eternity. However, he chooses to stay and wait for his wife to pass, and when she gets there, they link up. However, she had another husband early in her life who passed away, who's been waiting there for decades, and so now the wife must figure out and choose which husband she wants to spend eternity with. I thought this film had a good blend of drama and comedy, the comedy mainly coming from the supporting cast who work in this area of the afterlife. There's a good bit of dark humor too, which I guess is to be expected, since it is dealing with the topic of death. And they also play around with the dark humor in terms of the other worlds that used to exist, but were gotten rid of because of times changing. And the drama was really interesting too, with the wife having to choose between the guy she's been with her entire life, or the guy who passed before the relationship could really take off. And it's gonna sting regardless of who she chooses. The movie makes good points for both sides, which makes it even more uncertain who she's going to pick. And the two husbands clash and fight for her, but I like how over the course of the film they get an understanding of each other. And I found the final decision that the wife makes to be very interesting and subversive. I was really surprised to learn that this movie only had a $12 million budget because it looks really good. All the VFX and the production design looked really good. The movie also had a ton of color. All the performances were really good and everyone bounced off each other well. Just a lot of great chemistry. But Miles Teller was a huge standout. He plays the older husband, and when he dies, his body language and gestures reflect his age. He starts to grow out of them because he's in a younger body that isn't weighed down by old age, but still some of his body language and his dialect is still there, and I thought it was really fun seeing Teller act act as an old man. Overall, this is a very solid comfort movie that tugged at the heartstrings well. The next film is Sorry Baby. It's about a young woman who gets sexually assaulted and throughout the rest of the movie tries to process that trauma. I thought it was super real, grounded, and authentic, which not only is reflected in the storytelling, but the overall cinematography and camera work really reflect this authentic tone. The rest of the film chronicles her over the years trying to deal with such an awful event, and I think it was done super well. The movie never felt exploitative or gratuitous. It felt like the director completely understood this topic and knew how to exactly execute it. How the sexual assault scene was done in the movie was not only unique, but also tasteful. They also balanced this movie with some humor or lighter elements, and it never took away from the seriousness or took me out of the film. I think it made sense because the humor felt true to the main character and how she would process and deal with such an event. John Carroll Lynch appears briefly and not only steals the show, but adds such a nice breather and provides the main character and the audience with this feeling that everything's gonna be fine. I thought this was a great movie that tackled the serious issue and treated it with great care and understanding. The next film is Begonia. It's about these two conspiracy theorists who kidnap a CEO, believing that she's an alien. This is probably the most grounded and accessible film Yorgos has made, but that doesn't mean this isn't still pretty weird and out there. With it being a Yorgos film, stylistically it is fantastic. The movie is shot incredibly well and at times looks gorgeous. The soundtrack by Jerskin Fendrix is easily one of the best scores of the year. The overall style, music, and presentation reminded me heavily of Stanley Kubrick's filmography. I'm surprised that Jesse Plemons didn't get nominated for Best Actor because I'd argue he was way better than some of the other nominees. Not to say that any of those were bad, they were all pretty good, but I thought Plemons was leaps and bounds better. He's always been great at playing these twisted, mentally ill figures, and to finally see him play this character while being given the front row seat was awesome. The script also gave his character depth, but he himself adds so much with this performance. Emma Stone was also really good in this movie. Just like Plemons, the script plus her acting made this a very interesting and engaging watch. The dialogue was very smart and made for some of the best dialogue-heavy scenes of the year. The arguments and debates that these two characters had were super thrilling and had me on the edge of my seat, because it felt like there was a ticking time bomb in each of these scenes, just knowing that something major was going to happen but not knowing when. In between these two characters is Dawn, played by Aidan Delpis, who's the other conspiracy theorist, and I think this character works well as a vessel for the audience. With him trying to figure out whether Jesse Plemons' character is correct or completely insane, he kind of felt like the heart of the movie to me. There's a decent amount of dark comedy woven into the movie well. The movie provides many hints and clues as to whether the conspiracy theory is correct or not, and it made for a very interesting project. This was another great Yorgos movie. The next movie is The Secret Agent. It's about a technology expert, played by Wagner Moura, on the run in 1977 Brazil during a military dictatorship, who gets entangled with an underground resistance movement while trying to escape with his son. Similar to The Mastermind, the title is ironic. The main character isn't a secret agent, he's just a normal guy trying to run away from an oppressive regime. He's not a military operative or has any experience related to being undercover. It's not a political thriller that gets your blood pumping or has tons of action. It's a mix of regular life with the political thriller aspects. Hell, now that I think about it, it's about a lot of different things. It's packed full of multiple different genres, and yet it all comes together well. Same can be said with the many subplots. I think what helps it come together is not only the filmmaking, but the fact that it's 2 hours and 40 minutes, which gives a lot of time to flesh things out. I think the best and most memorable part of this movie is the world. The world of this movie feels very lived in and vivid. We get to see so many different angles of 70s Brazil through so many people. The world has so much personality. Wagner Moura is of course good in the film, and he carries about 50% of it because the other 50% is the world of the film. And I'm glad I got nominated for Best International Feature. The next film is Surat. It's about a father and son searching for their missing daughter/sister at a series of techno raves in the Moroccan desert. However, World War III breaks out, and soon they join up with other ravers and truck across the Moroccan desert. The first hour starts out pretty slow, with it just kind of being a laid-back road trip, just living a day in a life with these characters, but the second half becomes one of the most intense movies I've seen since Warfare. It was a super unexpected and wild turn of events. I was getting a bit sleepy around the hour mark, but once the movie got real, I locked the fuck in. It had one of the most shocking moments I've seen all year. That moment completely knocked me on my ass. And from there on out, I was on the edge of my seat because anything could happen. And what makes this super intense similar to Warfare was the excellent sound design. At the beginning, the rave music was really awesome, and I didn't realize later that it was the film's original score, which makes it even cooler. And then the rave music was incorporated into other parts of the film that added an already intense atmosphere. The cinematography was outstanding. There's a lot of great shots of the desert, but there's also these really cool shots at night where the characters are driving and their only source of light is the headlights. Paired with the excellent music, made scenes like this and other landscape shots feel very mesmerizing. All the characters felt super authentic and felt like everyday people. It added a sense of realism to the movie. This movie was another huge surprise from this year. The next film is It Was Just an Accident. It follows a mechanic who believes the man he encounters is a former torturer from prison. So he follows the guy, knocks him out, and locks him in a box in his car. However, the guy says that he's not the person he's looking for, so the mechanic finds other people who are victims of that same torturer to confirm that it's him. I think the story behind this movie is very interesting, because the director of this film has had the Iranian government up his ass for years for committing the horrible crime of making movies. He actually went to jail for it. You think the government would have more important shit to do than to harass someone for making art, but okay. And so they had to do a lot of sneaky shit to be able to film the movie. And when they did finish filming, the Iranian government wouldn't let them edit the movie, so it had to be smuggled out of the country to get edited. The cinematography is excellent, and it's honestly really surprising how much they accomplished with the government constantly looming over them. There's a lot of great wonders that probably were already a pain in the ass to do, but to do it with an oppressive regime watching over is a whole nother level of impressive. All the acting was very well done, the dialogue was very strong. In the dialogue, they were able to incorporate a decent amount of dark comedy that felt very natural to the situations in the film. It felt true to the characters and what a person might say at that moment. None of the humor felt wonky or made the movie tonally confused. It's definitely worth checking out this one, not only because it's good, but as a giant fuck you to the Iranian government. And in no way does that statement support the current war, I just don't like governments that censor art. The next movie is Splitsville. It's about this guy going through a divorce due to his wife cheating, and asks his friends for advice. The friends are a couple in a polyamorous relationship. The guy ends up shagging the wife, which pisses off the husband, which then pushes the plot forward for the rest of the film. Even though it technically is a rom-com, the romantic part of it isn't as present as the comedy. I mean, it literally says an unromantic comedy in the tagline. The comedy is front and center and takes precedent over the film's logic. There isn't any grand arcs or character development, it's just non-stop absurdity, which is good. There's an awesome blend of slapstick comedy and sharp humor. There's constant gags. Surprisingly, there's some really good stunt work here. For it being a comedy, I didn't really expect it to have such great artistry in the camera work. A lot of unexpected wonders in this film. There is this really cool montage that is conveyed entirely through a one take. All the actors had really great chemistry, thus making the comedy land a lot better. Overall, it's just a simple but great comedy film. The next movie is Nouvelle Vague. This is one of the 2 Linklater films this year, and it's about the making of Jean-Luc Godard's 1960 film, Breathless. This is probably one of the most impressive films from a technical perspective. How they recreated 1959 seamlessly needs to be applauded. Being shot on 35mm black and white, as well as making the audio sound older, made me very immersed into the film. It's also just a fun hangout movie about making a movie. Movies about making movies have always piqued my interest and made me appreciate and love the art of film even more. Seeing filmmakers come up with certain shots, how to create a certain look, or brainstorm creative ideas is fun to me. The main character is so fascinating to listen to, similar to another Linklater character that we will get into in the future. He always has an interesting response or rebuttal. He always has something very extremely interesting to say about art. It makes me really think deep about film. If the person saying this stuff though wasn't Jean-Luc Godard, then I would assume that this guy is pretentious as hell, but he can 100% back up what he's saying, as shown in the film that he's making and the rest of his filmography, because Breathless went on to be one of the most important films in the French New Wave movement. So yeah, I not only found this to be pretty laid back and small scale, but it also gave me a bigger appreciation for film. The next movie is Train Dreams. It's about a railroad worker in the early 20th century American West, where he spends most of the runtime trying to find his purpose. Right off the bat, this is one of the most beautiful looking films of the year. The world of the movie feels super immersive and tangible. The sound plays a huge part with so many little details in the environment. It made most of this movie feel very relaxing and meditative. Tons of gorgeous stills. It's obviously inspired by Terrence Malick, but damn does it do a good job at emulating his style. The production design made every bit of this world feel very lived in. The movie chronicles the life of the main character, and throughout the time jumps we meet several different supporting characters. My favorite out of all these being William H. Macy's character. He gives one of the best performances I've seen from him in a while. He plays a very interesting but fun character. All these supporting characters play a part in showing reflections of who the main character is and what he'll be in the future. The story is very simple but beautiful, driven mostly by visual storytelling. The main character spends a lot of time trying to find his place in life after a major change occurs, and he hardly ever starts to find his footing throughout the picture, as well as showing him aging and seeing the world change around him. The movie puts focus on how out of touch he becomes with the world. Throughout the time timeline of the story, a lot of major world events happen like the World Wars, yet the movie, just like the main character, pays no mind to it. And before he knows it, the world slowly pulls the rug out from under him as he progressively gets older. And the way the movie concludes his arc is subversive but satisfying. So yeah, very beautiful movie in terms of filmmaking and storytelling. The next film is No Other Choice. It's about a man who recently gets laid off and is shooting for a good job position, and to really make sure he gets the job, he goes the extra mile by killing any other potential people who could get the job. Surprise, surprise, a new Park Chan-wook film ends up being one of the best of the year. He has continued to consistently pump out great films for decades, with films like Oldboy, The Handmaiden, Decision to Leave, and now this film. Park Chan-wook still finds ways to make his cinematography refreshing. The way the camera moves or how it's framed was not only avant-garde, but super purposeful. The film has a good balance of comedy and crime thriller, leaning more towards comedy, and it led to some of the funniest moments of the year. One that sticks out to me is this scene where two of these characters are arguing and the diegetic music is so loud to the point where they have to yell at each other, which this scene also has one of the best needle drops of the year. I know that doesn't really sound special, but when you watch the movie you'll understand, it's very funny. Although a good chunk of this movie is goofy and comedic, there's also some good drama too. The family as a whole is super compelling, with many of them having their own development, motivations, and goals, which give you a reason to want the main character to come out on top. Though the message isn't very subtle, it's conveyed in a comedic tone, plus the rest of the film being executed well makes it funny but also impactful. How this didn't get a single Oscar nomination this year is beyond me. The next movie is If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. It's about a therapist, played by Rose Byrne, who's overwhelmed with her child's illness, an absent husband, and her own professional and personal struggles. This is essentially Uncut Gems, but instead of dealing with gambling, it deals with motherhood. And I think it's the most stressful movie of the year. Everything slowly closes in on the main character. The world is pretty much against her. She constantly has to deal with all kinds of bullshit. It's not even one step forward, two steps back for her. She's just constantly getting kneecapped at the worst times imaginable. There's hardly any moments for her to breathe or relax, and in every scene there's always something going wrong. To add to the stress, a majority of the camera work is very claustrophobic. There's hardly any wide shots. The editing also adds to the franticness by constantly cutting around in scenes. The sound is specifically done to fuck with your senses by having characters constantly talking over each other, or using specific stress-induced sounds like an alarm. All these elements really put you into the shoes of the main character. Also, the Uncut Gems parallel isn't too far off, because the director of the movie, Mary Bronstein, is married to Ronald Bronstein, who wrote those films. There's also some neat casting choices here. Conan O'Brien and A$AP Rocky were both surprisingly really good in this film. Rose Byrne gives a stellar performance, and I'd argue she probably should have won Best Actress. Overall, it's just a movie that captivates you and never lets go. And the last film in this category is Jake Kelly. It's a new film by Noah Baumbach about an aging narcissistic movie star, played by George Clooney, facing an existential crisis. He traverses Europe with his manager, played by Adam Sandler, to reconnect with his family members and confront past regrets. There's a lot of neat visuals that I dug. I really liked how the film transitioned into flashbacks. It was super creative and interesting. There's an important phone call scene that I can recall was very creatively done. Some of the smaller supporting actors like Billy Crudup or Patrick Wilson have some of the best scenes in the entire film, though Crudup's character plays a bigger role into Jake Kelly's character and his inner conflict. Wilson shares a short scene with Adam Sandler, and it was surprisingly emotional. Speaking of which, it's always awesome to see Adam Sandler outside of a bad comedy movie giving a solid and human performance. Him and Clooney have really good chemistry, and I'd say he's probably the heart of the film. Clooney is great as this character, which is essentially a reflection or a piece of the real Clooney in some way. I found his inner turmoil to be very interesting. Throughout the film, he tries his hardest to tie up loose ends by trying to reconnect with his daughters and his father. He tries balancing all these spinning tops, and I found the end result to be realistic and unsensational. It didn't feel Hollywood, and I think that was my favorite part of the movie. The relationships between these different characters felt very down to earth, and it seemed like Baumbach respected the main character enough to give him that ending, as well as the other characters who get caught up in Clooney's shenanigans throughout the story. The only issue I see with this movie is that some people might not connect with the story as much as others because it's essentially rich people problems, which is kind of an oversimplification, but at the same time, it is true. And now we're on to the next category, which are my favorite films of the year. Starting off, my favorites is Warfare, directed by Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza. It's about a platoon during a mission in Iraq that starts out normal but goes completely sideways. This is easily one of the most realistic war films ever made, which doesn't surprise me because Ray Mendoza was in this situation. The events of this film are not only based on his experience, but the experience of the other Navy SEALs in this mission. The groundedness and the gritty nature are reflected in the style. Outside of the opening scene, there's no musical score, there's no licensed music, there's no triumphant Hollywood Hollywoodized scenes or dramatic music to make it more intense. It completely relies on the brilliant sound design, sound mixing, and sound editing. I wasn't the biggest fan of Garland's previous film, Civil War, but the best parts of that film mainly involved the sound. The gunshots in that film actually sounded really loud and added to the tension, and overall it just all sounded very realistic. And the positives from Civil War are prevalent throughout the entire runtime of Warfare, making this a very intense and stressful experience. The IED explosion made me and others that I watched it with in a theater shit our pants. The shows of force were enthralling, especially in a theater. I can't imagine how amazing this was to watch in IMAX, because I don't think you'd get the same experience watching this at home unless you're wearing some grade A headphones. It blows my mind how this movie didn't get nominated for sound. The atmosphere made every moment harrowing, and the choice to only focus on the platoon and the inside of the house made this even more stressful, because it never shows us what the enemies are doing outside or what they're exactly planning. They're like an invisible force. I also really liked how different the narrative structure is in the movie. There isn't a main character, there's no character arcs. It made the movie feel even more matter of fact. All the tactics and training looked really real. You might be wondering, how would I know what looks real? You've never served. Well, for one, I served in Nuketown, and two, I watched it again a few months after it came out, but with someone who did serve, and it was really cool hearing him break down the film and point out everything that went down in the film was pretty much to a T, even down to the excellent sound. The sound of bullets whizzing by, the IED, the jets, all the performances were fantastic, the standouts being Joseph Quinn and Cosmo Jarvis. They're probably given the most to do dramatically, with their characters getting pretty fucked up, and seeing them panic and hearing them scream at the top of their lungs was chilling. And it's very impressive how all this was done with a modest $20 million budget. Granted, it takes place in one location, but still a lot of shit happens in this movie. There's plenty of VFX, green screen, and practical work being done here. It really goes to show how much you can achieve by managing your budget. So many blockbusters come out and look half as good as movies like Warfare or The Brutalist, which make up about 5% of their budget. I remember the discourse of this movie being pretty divisive, with a lot of people claiming that this movie was military propaganda, which I couldn't disagree more with. I don't see how a single soul could watch this and go, hell yeah, that looks badass, I'm gonna go join the Marines, fuck yeah, America! Overall, this is one of the best war films I've seen in quite some time. The next movie is Frankenstein, directed by Guillermo del Toro. It's obviously about Frankenstein, you should probably have an understanding of it by now. With it being a Guillermo del Toro film, it's unsurprisingly stellar in the visuals department. It's no wonder why it won Best Production Design, Costuming, Hair, and Makeup. It's a visual marvel. Everything felt so tangible and lived in. The VFX also looked stunning. There wasn't any moments that stuck out to me as fake or bad CG. I loved the constant use of green throughout the film. The camera work is super unique compared to everything else I've seen this year, and it felt true to Guillermo del Toro. I love how it just sweeps around the many environments in the film. I thought it was going to be super slow paced and boring, especially due to the 2 hours and 35-minute runtime, but I was taken aback with how engaging the story was and how fast the pacing is. The characters are super fun and interesting to watch. It was awesome seeing Frankenstein assemble different things in order to make the undead, and I really like how the story flips from being about Dr. Frankenstein to being about the creature for a good amount of the runtime. The creature was super interesting to watch, and seeing him interact with the world around him and seeing him slowly learn things like the English language was cool. There was hardly any moments where I was bored. I was constantly intrigued with each segment of the story. All the performances were brilliant. Oscar Isaac was great as Dr. Frankenstein. Jacob Elordi did a great job bringing the creature to life with his body language, mannerisms, and his line delivery, adding so much humanity to the character. The only flaws I had with the film is that I think the ending is a little bit rushed. I think an extra 10-15 minutes would have made the conclusion a lot more balanced compared to the rest of the film. And this single line is complete dog shit. Outside of those two issues, it's a great film. The next movie is Blue Moon, which is the second Linklater film to appear in this video. It's about a lyricist named Lawrence Hart, played by Ethan Hawke, focusing on the night his partnership with Richard Rodgers ended with the premiere of Oklahoma. A lot of things that I liked about Nouvelle Vague appear in this film. The main character is so magnetic and interesting to listen to. Hearing his thoughts on art and the world around him and the way he interacts with other people is so fun. The way he navigates conversations and senses whether an argument is getting too heated and knows when to pull his punches is super engaging. He's super charismatic, and this is due to the witty and naturalistic dialogue and Ethan Hawke's outstanding performance. This is the best performance I've seen from Ethan Hawke in quite some time. When I watched the movie, I went in knowing nothing other than that it was made by Richard Linklater. I was super enthralled by Ethan Hawke's character in the opening scene, and I was thinking, I don't want this to end, and it never does. The film takes place in one location, and the main character just rattles on for most of it, and it was music to my ears. Similar to Nouvelle Vague, it's a hangout movie, although there's a lot more dramatic elements going on here with his falling out with Richard Rodgers or his relationship with other characters, but there's a good portion where he's just chilling and hanging out with the bartender or the piano player, and you can tell Ethan Hawke is having a blast. So yeah, I found this movie to be pretty simple but fun. The next film is Marty Supreme, and it's my favorite movie of the year. For the most part, I thought this year for movies was good, but not amazing. Until this movie came out, and holy fuck, this was the movie that I needed. I distinctly remember getting out of the theater and feeling jittery for almost an hour, similar to how it feels when you get off a roller coaster. I was completely blown away with what I had just seen. While the movie is about Marty Mauser, played by Timothée Chalamet, trying to become a world champion table tennis player, it's mainly about the crazy shenanigans that happens in between the table tennis. And I thought this was the worthy successor to Uncut Gems that I wanted out of the Smashing Machine. And Uncut Gems is one of my favorite films and one of the most important films to me, and I was waiting so long for a successor, for a new project, for something that would follow up that movie. When I got out of the theater after watching this, I was like, fuck yes. It took 6 years, but goddamn it finally happened. It has the frenetic and chaotic style that Uncut Gems had. People are constantly talking over each other and arguing, and the camera work is super claustrophobic, there's constant cutting, just overall just tons of chaos. And some of the editing and camera work that I talked about when I was talking about If I Had Legs I'd Kick You applies here. The cinematography in general is just incredible. It packs so much personality and energy. I also really like how the bluish, purplish color grading from Uncut Gems is brought over into this film. The music, oh my god, the music is fucking fantastic. I've listened to this album at least 10 times. Uncut Gems had one of my favorite movie soundtracks of all time, and Daniel Lopatin, I don't know to say his last name. I'll just call him Dan.
Lopatin.
Dan found a way to upstage himself and make a better soundtrack, because almost every single track on here is a banger. Holocaust Honey, banger. The Real Game, banger. The Call, banger. I Love You Tokyo, banger. I can keep going on and on about how each of these tracks is just amazing. Despite the film taking place in the 50s, it blends the 80s synth somehow seamlessly, and same can be said with the 80s needle drops. Forever Young and Everybody Wants to Rule the World are some of the best needle drops I've seen in quite some time. The original score even added to the adrenaline many times. The dialogue is phenomenal, carrying over that style that Uncut Gems had. The dialogue kept the movie feeling naturalistic and grounded, even when the movie got pretty absurd, and some of the dialogue was just really funny, which led to plenty of laughs in my theater. The story is no holds bar chaos, there's hardly any breathing room because shit is just constantly happening. It's usually 1 step forward and 5 steps back. Just when you think Marty is doing fine, you think he's gonna make it, oh, things are gonna go right, bam, something comes out of nowhere from like 20 minutes ago and fucks him, which is mostly to do with his poor decision making, and also people constantly trying to get their 2 cents in definitely adds to the chaos. All the performances are phenomenal. This is probably my favorite Timothée Chalamet performance. Marty is such a fascinating and fun character to watch. It's very exhilarating seeing him create his own game of Jenga and try to spin all the tops, and he ends up creating his own hellscape. Even though he's a complete dickhead who screws everyone over, his charisma is what keeps you rooting for him, and hearing him voice his philosophy is super interesting. Out of context, a lot of what he says sounds inspirational, but in context it's completely wrong because of how he goes about trying to execute his dream, similar to Howard Ratner from Uncut Gems. And it's also kind of fun seeing him navigate conversations and try to fuck people over and manipulate them. Seeing him praise someone and then in the next scene talking shit behind their back. He's the complete subversion of your typical sports movie protagonist. Hell, I'd say he's the real villain of the movie. Kevin O'Leary was surprisingly, or unfortunately depending on how much you know about him, great in the movie. He possibly drops the hardest line in the movie. I liked the casting in general, with some of the cast being people picked off the street or random obscure celebrities. It created a diverse array of people. Some of the people from Uncut Gems appear here too, and I was so mad how badly this movie got snubbed at the Oscars. Somehow F1 got an Oscar win, but not Marty Supreme. I was honestly banking on Timothée Chalamet winning Best Actor, but nope, that didn't happen either. Michael B. Jordan did a good job in Sinners, and his speech was pretty good, but I just didn't think any of what he did was on par with Chalamet. No disrespect. Overall, this is my favorite movie of the decade. The next movie is Sentimental Value. It's about these estranged sisters reuniting with their filmmaker father, Gustav, played by Stellan Skarsgård, who tries to cast one of his daughters in his comeback film. I absolutely love the characters in this film. There's so much depth in almost every scene involving these characters, and what gives them depth is the amount of subtlety in all these scenes. These characters talk like actual people. They don't randomly exposition dump about their feelings or past events. Although we do eventually get more insight into the boiling conflicts between these characters, it's not unrewarding or forced. It's all executed very naturally. Speaking of which, the movie feels very naturalistic. It never felt corny or overly sentimental. It never felt sensationalized. There's no generic sad music cues. Everything felt very down to earth and real. If there thoroughly explores themes of generational trauma and anxiety, using that generational trauma to create parallels with Gustav and his children. And even more, this generational trauma is captured expertly with the use of the house in the movie. The house plays a huge part in showing the emotional baggage that these characters hold. It's where Gustav wants to make his film. He tries casting his daughter, but she rejects it due to their unresolved conflict. And the daughter doesn't really know whether she's being manipulated by him to elevate his film career, or it's being used as a way to express his love and affection for her. And they also explore more of these themes through the other sister. Although her life is a lot more stable and normal, the consequences from her father's actions still affect her. Another aspect that I really liked about this movie is that the story is also about filmmaking. Similar to Nouvelle Vague, it's always interesting to watch a filmmaker brainstorm and go through the artistic process, seeing how he wants to shoot certain scenes, or where he wants to put the camera, or what scene he wants to do in a certain room. It's all very interesting. Again, it makes you appreciate the art form. How the art of film is used to try to repair the relationship between all three of these characters. Overall, I'd 100% recommend this for the amazing character work alone. And the last film in this category is Nirvana the Band, the Show, the Movie. It's about these people in a band called Nirvana the Band. There's zero correlation between the real Nirvana and this movie, and they try to get a gig booked at Toronto's Rivoli. However, their shenanigans accidentally leads to time travel. I haven't had a chance to watch the web series Nirvana the Band, the Show, but luckily I didn't need to. The movie stands on its own. The only things I probably missed were the callbacks to the web series, but even without that knowledge, I was obviously able to thoroughly enjoy it. This is one of the best comedies I've seen in a while. There's constant gags and jokes and humor in every scene, and there's so much detail in the writing of the jokes. There's a great blend of normal scenes and guerrilla mockumentary filmmaking. What I mean by that is that the film has plenty of scenes where they're filming in public and talk to random strangers, and the reactions that they get from those strangers is hilarious. Something akin to Eric Andre or Impractical Jokers. And they blend these styles so seamlessly into the story, it makes me wonder how they are able to blend the two, because it cuts from scripted stuff to guerrilla filmmaking, and it never feels jarring or out of place. Another impressive thing about the movie is the VFX. 90% of the time it's hard for me to figure out where the VFX started and ended. All this is very impressive for how low the budget is. And to explain the time travel part a little bit, they end up taking footage from like 17 years ago of themselves, and end up blending old footage with new footage to make them talk to their younger selves, and it somehow works seamlessly, because they didn't plan 17 years in the future to make a feature-length time travel film, yet it's done so well that it makes you think that could have been a possibility. They also probably used a decent amount of VFX and definitely used body doubles in these scenes to achieve more with this footage. And how they figure out that they went back in time is also really funny. They use a certain song and a certain movie scene to convey it. Outside of the non-stop goofiness, there's actually a good amount of heart to this movie, to where that you actually care a decent amount for both these characters. Overall, this is not only one of the best comedy films of the year, but one of the most impressive on the filmmaking front. And that's the end of this video. 2025 was another great year for movies. People constantly bitch and moan about there not being any good movies anymore, when that literally couldn't be further from the truth. Blockbusters have definitely been lacking in quality, but blockbusters aren't the only thing being released. There's a variety of films being released every year that provide greatness. I don't know when the next video will be, but hopefully as soon as possible. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.